Welcome to Cinema 35. My name is Craig Hamill. I'm the founder programmer of Secret Movie Club and your host for today. Today, we are going to be watching Charlie Chaplin's very first feature film. He had made tons of short movies, many of which are masterpieces, but today's movie, The Kid, made in 1921, is considered his very first feature film, and actually one of the best things that he ever made. Please stick around after the movie. We're going to be interviewing Los Angeles Council member Mitch O'Farrell. We're also going to be interviewing today Michael Alexander, who has been heavily involved for decades in Los Angeles and the arts, and put on for decades amazing public events in downtown Los Angeles that were free to the public at the California Plaza, because our theme is Los Angeles and the arts. And then we're going to give you a little more trivia and deep dive into The Kid. You know, all movies, like any work of art, they speak for themselves. I'm, in a way, superfluous. I'm totally happy to be here, don't get me wrong. I can't believe I get to intro these movies. I don't drive my family crazy. I get to talk to you because I'm obsessed with these films. But a masterpiece like Chaplin's The Kid speaks for itself. And yet, knowing some of the background behind the movie really enriches your experience of it. One of the fascinating things about this film is that Chaplin made it. He was in a rushed marriage, his first marriage of several, and his son had been born deformed and died within 3 days, his first son. And he had been experiencing creative block. And when his son died, the idea for this movie came about. Within 10 days, he was shooting this movie after the death of his son. And you can't watch this movie after you know that without seeing all the tremendous... Sorry, I'm Irish. I almost tear up thinking about it, and a family man myself. But you can't watch the movie without realizing that he's putting all of his emotion into this film, which you're going to discover is The Tramp. It's a comedy, but The Tramp, accidentally discovered in this film, became an international celebrity. And the other really interesting thing is that Chaplin himself, Charlie Chaplin, he was torn from his mother. He was born poor in Victorian England at the end of the 19th century. And at 7 years old, the state took him from his mother, who he loved, and put him into an orphanage. And you're going to see scenes here that are not just about Chaplin's feelings as a father, but Chaplin's feelings as a child who himself was taken from his parent. So in a weird way, both Chaplin the Tramp and Jackie Coogan the Kid are Chaplin. But enough. I'll talk more about this film and all the amazing things about it after. One of the great things here is that Chaplin proves himself, and I don't know who said this is not my own thought, but a contemporaneous critic at the time said Chaplin, with The Kid, proves himself not to only be possibly the world's greatest comedian, but its greatest tragedian. This film shows Chaplin's ability to balance laughs with tears, all in the service of something amazing. So let's get right to it. Charlie Chaplin's 1921 first feature, The Kid. Welcome back. Thanks so much for watching Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, his very first official feature film. We're here with Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell talking movies. So, Councilmember, you and I have talked a little bit about Chaplin, but we were talking about his shorts, his one-reelers, when you and I met last time. Now, we're talking about his very first feature film, One that as I get older actually keeps going up and up as probably one of my favorite Chaplins. What do you think of The Kid?
It's a masterwork of Charlie Chaplin's, just plain and simple. And he brings the tramp character back for his first feature, and puts
a moment ago, and then a moment next we're going to be laughing. What do you account for Chaplin's talent for being able to make a movie that everybody would go see and laugh at, but then be crying at and then laughing again? How was he able to do that with subject matter that really, when you think about it, shouldn't have been funny, but he was able to make it both hilarious and moving? Where do you think that talent came from?
From a deep understanding of human nature. And I think, Chaplin came up through the music halls in London and in England. And I think that he survived through life's hard knocks himself. So when he came to Los Angeles, and at the advent of the film industry, right when it relocated from the East Coast to the West Coast, his timing couldn't have been better. We're just so lucky that he was where he was when film became such a newer but more refined art form in Los Angeles 100 years ago. We're so lucky. So I think it came from understanding human nature, and also understanding that as a comedian, you play the truth. You don't play necessarily for laughs. You just play the truth. And then if you want to throw in some self-deprecating silliness, but never stray from the true emotions that you are communicating and presenting to an audience, then you really have the audience in your hands. And especially with when the character himself or herself are in on the joke. That scene where they're separated, it's shattering.
It's almost unbearable.
Oh, it's unbearable. It is unbearable. But it's worth staying invested in and watching all the way through, because it's a beautiful story and so heartfelt.
Well, and it's I was going to ask you, we've talked about it a bit before. You yourself came from a pretty tough background, just in terms of class and money and not having any. And as you just said, Chaplin was the same. Weirdly, he came up, he figured it out. He becomes, here's this kid with no money who becomes the greatest star in the world. But he then goes back to his childhood experiences, and I guess he makes something important and worthwhile out of it. He doesn't let it embitter him. And I just want to throw to you, having come from a pretty tough background yourself, and now here you are, a council member, that's a pretty big journey as well. And I just wondered, for anybody who's watching this, who maybe is on hard times, who maybe doesn't know how they're going to pay their next rent check, or doesn't have money to go get food, how did you and your family see yourself through those times to be able to not just survive, but to thrive?
We had undying love, despite all of the conflict and personal crises that swirled around us the whole time. A broken family, a reunified family, eviction from, multiple times from our homes. But which is why this always gets me so emotionally, because I cannot imagine a life for my siblings and I if we had been torn apart as a family on top of everything else.
Right.
And I just can't even, it's unfathomable to me, because all we had was each other at various times in my childhood. That's all we had. We didn't have anything else. And so that's the same story for anyone else who is living in poverty. That's the bare minimum. And, that's why we have such a responsibility in society to keep families together. That's everything. And I think Charlie Chaplin,
as always, for talking movies with us. And we just want to tell everybody that every summer, the council member O'Farrell puts on the Echo Park film series in Echo Park. It's free. You should, if it is summertime right now or summer's coming, check it out, see what's playing. Go get your friends and watch some great movies. And thank you, as always, for talking with us about movies.
Thanks, Craig. It's been a real pleasure talking about The Kid.
we have a very special guest for this Cinema 35. Full disclosure, he is my uncle, Uncle Michael Alexander. He also, whether he was my uncle or not, was for, Michael, was it 20 years at Cal Plaza or more?
27.
For 27 years, the artistic director at Cal Plaza in downtown Los Angeles, which put on amazing shows year after year that were free to the public. I attended many of them in every medium, from dance to concerts to theater to performance to lectures. And now Michael Alexander is the artistic director at Caltech in Pasadena. He has been wonderful to me, and his commitment his whole life to the arts and being involved in Los Angeles' culture has had a big influence on me. And he got his start partially in mime and comedy, which is why I thought he would be perfect for Charlie Chaplin and the Kid. And then, of course, I do have to say that his children, Janelle and Seth Alexander, are my cousins, or like brothers and sisters to me. So this is a family reunion. It's wonderful to have you, Michael. Thank you for being here.
And thank you very much for inviting me to join you.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. And let's just dive right into it, Michael. So we just watched Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, his first feature film. And when I started to do this in December, you gave me a Chaplin book, which I actually showed everybody in that first round of episodes. And I know that when you started out as a young man, am I right? Did you study with Marceau?
I aspired to go into mime. And I think, if I can just jump in here, one of the reasons that mime and clowning were so interesting to me was because of my parents, who were both pre-teenagers during the very last years of the silent era. And even my father, who was European born and got here in 1938, probably saw Chaplin films.
From money or power. He's just sort of using his natural resources as an underdog in a tough world, and he's always keeping it light. It's hard to really get into, but he really nailed that character you feel for and identify with right away, I think.
And I think as one watches the evolution of his filmmaking, he went from a character that had a certain amount of impishness or a little bit of mischievousness in it to a character that was much more of an innocent and an optimist.
Absolutely.
There was always that tomorrow's a better day type of an approach. You can see it in many of his films, particularly when he's sort of pedaling off with his cane and waddling off into the sunset, that it's the walk of somebody who's looking forward to tomorrow and not afraid of it.
Yeah, I never put it quite into words, but I think you nailed it. He's an optimist, and he's a real optimist. And I think that takes a lot of courage, actually. And I think it's maybe why those movies speak to us 100 years later. I wanted to ask you, you said something that I really like. You've said it a few times in our conversation. I just want to make sure we immortalize it here. So you have decades and decades of putting on events and artistic performances. And you have this great quote, and I just want to set it up and you go with it, about how the performance or the event isn't over until the last conversation. And I love that, because I'm a movie maker, and that's the thing you hope for your movies, is people go to a coffee shop and they keep talking about it. And there's something about that community and engagement. But I don't want to say any more. What did you mean by that? And because that always meant a lot to me when you would say that.
Well, it's interesting. I've had some screenings that I've gone to where there have been special setups for people to be able to talk about the movies that they've just seen. We're seeing it more and more with the live performing arts, where people in formal or in informal kinds of settings have a chance to redigest what they've seen, what they've heard, and learn very often by listening to people who have very different life experiences than their own, that though they may have seen the exact same show, they've come away with it with very, very different understandings and lessons learned. And I can remember how thrilled I was when we put on mic during one of our performances. And early on, we did a lot of lunch hour shows. And even for the people that were not paying attention to the show, they were sitting around at tables at the plaza and eating lunch. They were able to overhear this post-performance conversation. And a young USC recent graduate of Asian heritage thanked us because she said this was the first time she saw her story on stage. And I think this is something that we're seeing more and more now in television and film. We certainly are seeing it more and more in live theater of all sorts, live performance, that people are getting a chance to see other people's stories.
Right.
And these are very, very important. And then the conversation that follows that is what starts to help us become more comfortable about where we are living in the most demographically diverse city maybe in the world.
Well, Uncle Michael, thank you so much. I want to say this Michael Alexander, who joined us for this interview, if people want to find out about Caltech programming, where can they go?
Events.caltech.edu.
So if you see this episode in the next few years, you should go check that out. And you might even see Michael Alexander there and get a conversation going with him. Michael, thank you very much for being on the show. And for not to get corny, but it's the truth. For, you've lived your whole life devoted to the arts sincerely, and it's inspiring. And I appreciate it, and I appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for recognizing that. You do it because that's what you end up doing. It's not because you're aiming for some kind of accolade. But thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Big thanks to Council Member Mitch O'Farrell and Caltech's Artistic Director Michael Alexander for joining us to talk about Los Angeles and the arts in this film. Some deep dish trivia and background as a parting goodbye. Along with what we said in the intro, and I'm sure people have done psychological studies into this, and I hope if I ever bump into you on the street, someone can tell me what this is called, but Charlie Chaplin made from this point for the next 30 years, hit after hit after hit, each movie seeping into our consciousness and the pop culture consciousness. After The Kid, he did The Gold Rush, which is my personal favorite Charlie Chaplin film and actually in my top 35 films of all time. He'd go on to do City Lights in the early 30s with one of the greatest endings of all time. He'd go on to do Modern Times about the Depression and technological advances, which has imagery that we still have in our pop culture today of Chaplin the tramp stuck in the gears of a big machine. He then went on to do The Great Dictator, which made fun of fascism and Adolf Hitler at the very beginning of World War II, long before everybody was in agreement that fascism and Adolf Hitler was a true evil in the world. And then even after that, he would go on to do Monsieur Verdot, a dark, dark comedy about a serial killer. Chaplin was just doing amazing movie after amazing movie. It's very interesting. After this movie, both Jackie Coogan and Charlie Chaplin went through very tough parts of their lives, which we can't get into right now. Jackie Coogan, actually, his parents wasted all of his money. And by his early adulthood, his stepfather, I believe, and his mother, but the parents, had blown all the money he had made from The Kid and other movies he made in the silent era. This forced the passage of what was called the Jackie Coogan Act, so that child stars couldn't be exploited. Although, unfortunately, you can see to this day, whether it's in pop or cinema, it can occasionally happen. Thankfully, Coogan ended up being, you may or may not know this, Uncle Fester on the Addams Family. And so he had a happy ending in a second act. And in 1972, when Jackie Coogan was in his mid-50s, almost 60, and Chaplin was nearing 80, they met again when Chaplin collected his Academy Award, both having gone through long passages of their life, both still friendly, both having it made through existence, which is tough, but always worthwhile, as Chaplin always affirmed in his movies. So thank you for joining us. My name's Craig. I'm the founder programmer of Secret Movie Club. You can check out everything we do on secretmovieclub.com. We show movies all over LA, and we also offer, no matter where you are, blogs, podcasts, and tons of stuff. You can find out all about it on secretmovieclub.com. Until then, watch great movies, and we hope you'll join us again when we show another movie in Cinema 35.